HannibalTV.com with none other than the legendary wrestler, the mass superstar, aka Demolition Axe, and many other gimmicks that we're probably going to get into today. But those are the two that he's best known for. I've met him numerous times. He's a great guy. Bill Eadie, how are you doing today, sir?
Very good, my friend. Good to see you. Good to see you.
I'm glad you recovered from COVID. Maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about your battle with COVID recently.
Oh, my goodness. It was a battle. My grandson went back to college, my oldest grandson, and the first week of January. And he's doing HVAC. So he's in his second semester of 4 semesters. And they were in a lab. They've got 2 3-hour labs. So they went back the first lab session. And he went back for the second one. And the instructor said there's 20 guys in the group. And he said a couple of the guys had contracted COVID. And he said, you might have to isolate yourself for a while. Well, long story short, 2 days later, he wakes up with symptoms. And then the day after that, my wife and I both had it. So we went to all three of us went to the ER, tested positive, asked the doctor, what do we do? And the doctor said, well, go home and follow protocol. So we said, what's protocol? He says, well, take lots of fluids and get some rest, and hopefully you'll feel better. And that was it. So unfortunately, my wife being a retired nurse, I've got 2 daughters who are nurses, so they contacted the doctors that they work with, and they got us both, all 3 of us, medication. But that didn't arrive for about the 3rd or 4th day. But 3 days into the treatment, we all felt better. So then we went back, and I got my first vaccination shot this past Monday, and my wife's now on the waiting list to get hers, and grandson as well. So we're all feeling better. But it was a rough 4 or 5 days, I'm telling you. I wouldn't want anybody to go through it. Not any of my good friends, and probably not any of my enemies.
I'm surprised that you had to go through so much trouble just to get the medication, that they wouldn't have been more forthcoming with giving that to you.
Nothing. They don't have any help suggestions for you other than fluids. Take some Tylenol. And, my situation, I've got AFib and high blood pressure. And my wife has some kidney problems. And fortunately, we got on like I said, the vaccine. But it was through my daughter's research and her physician she worked for that prescribed the medications for us, or we'd still be in bad shape.
What were the medications, just out of curiosity?
Well, mine was Mexricin or something like that, and my wife took the same medication that President Trump took, the malaria treatment. So it seemed to be pretty effective, and you would think that, it's out there. Mine was similar to that, but I couldn't take that particular medication because of my allergies and anaphylactic reaction to shellfish and iodine. But I would have taken the same thing.
Yeah, in the last interview I did with you, you had talked about that story with the shellfish where you had that out-of-body experience.
Right.
Did that overall make you more comfortable with the possibility of death, knowing that you had that experience and seemingly like there could be something else after death?
Well, you know what? It did. After I had that situation, I was referred to a book, Life After Life. And the lady that wrote the book is Elizabeth Eadie, my same last name. And it was ironic. In the books, she interviewed, I don't know, hundreds of people. Some of them had negative experiences where, things are pulling them down. A lot of them, fortunately, in my situation, I had a positive experience. I was going up. I left my body I actually looked down and saw my wife holding my head on the movie floor. And I was going up silent, peaceful, going up in this tunnel atmosphere, stars and bright lights, like I was ascending. And I heard to my left, there's no blood pressure. And another guy on the right says, I can't find a pulse. No blood pressure. I can't find a pulse. I'm thinking, who are they talking about? I've got high blood pressure. So that went on for, it seemed like forever, but my wife said it was only about a minute or so, less than that. And they mentioned it, and I turned around and I had this sensation of went right back into my body. But my wife said my eyes weren't open and I didn't move. And I'm looking and I'm attached to a monitor where they're going to give me a shock. And I looked at the two lines on the monitor, both flat. I'm thinking, well, I'm dead. And I said, well, I've got my insurance taken care of. This is okay. I better call Vince. I'm not going to make WrestleMania. And then I heard, I've got a pulse. He said, I've got a blood pressure. He says, what is it? 25 over 15. I'm thinking 25 over 15. So I didn't move, but in my body I moved and I saw the chart and the machine where they hooked me up and I saw a little blip and then it went again, blip. And I think, well, I'm back.
Well, that is a very interesting experience indeed.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you researched that more after as well. What do you think happens after that experience? What's your theory on life after death?
Well, I'm not afraid of dying. I don't want to die. I don't think anybody does. But I really believe that there is life after this life. And since I had a positive experience, I try to keep a positive frame of mind that, maybe there is a heaven and I'm going to go to heaven and I'm going to see my friends, all the guys that you all talked about and we've met and wrestled, but more importantly, my family members that I believe are in heaven. And people may scoff at that, but I don't want to be prepared to go and no place to go. So I think I live a pretty clean life. I don't put people down. I don't try to step on people. I try to be positive. I try to help people. And I think that this is one stage of our life. And I hope that we have many more stages because a lot of people, you would hate to think that they're only here for, little children that die early and people that die when they're teenagers and things like. I hope that there's much more beyond this.
Now, speaking of death, you've lived a long life for a wrestler. I hope you live a lot longer. You seem to be very healthy. But as far as all of the wrestling friends that you've lost over the years, is there anyone in particular that hit you the hardest?
Well, it's funny. It's not funny. We were talking about it earlier this evening. Recently, Butch Reed just passed. I didn't know Butch had issues. It doesn't eat two heart attacks. Nikolai Volkov seemed healthy. The one that was most recent was Joe, Animal, right out of the blue. And we never know. This recent situation that I had with COVID got me thinking. I didn't get worried. I don't want to leave my wife and my family and my friends and but you have to prepare. If it happens, there's a purpose for it. We don't know the purpose. We don't know the reasoning, but there's two things that we're all going to do. We're going to die and we're going to pay taxes. I'll pay my taxes and I want to live for longer.
Now, when you started in the Sheik's wrestling territory, from what I understand. Could you share any stories with us from that Detroit territory?
Well, I actually started with Guido Mongo, who trained me in Pittsburgh. But Guido had a relationship with the Sheik, and I was teaching in Ohio. So I broke in Pittsburgh, which is only about, I want to say maybe 110 miles from the Pittsburgh area. But I was teaching and coaching football and track in Ohio, which was closer to Columbus, Toledo, not too far from Detroit. So I got an opportunity to work for the Sheik. And we were talking earlier. I mean, I hit it off with him right away. I only had positive remarks for the Sheik. I know that a lot of people had negative situations with him, but for some reason he liked me. He took me under his wing. If he told me he was going to pay me $250, he paid me $250. Now that wasn't always the case with some of the guys. And I think, and you've been in this business long enough, sometimes promoters or bookers or matchmakers, whatever you call them, they're going to tell you this, tell you that, and they really don't mean it. I think in his situation, everything he told me, he backed up. Like Ole Anderson, everything Ole told me, backed up. George Scott, backed up. So those guys I have nothing but positive memories of.
And as far as the Sheik himself, did you ever get in the ring with him?
No, I was green at the time. I was breaking in. When I first went in there, I was working a gimmick, a paramedic gimmick under a mask. There was two of us, my friend that I had played ball with in high school and college. We went in as the paramedics, white outfits, sort of like EMT people, and was learning the business. And he sort of protected me that way because he didn't want me to be exposed. And sometimes you thrust guys in the business and you give them a character and everybody knows who they are. And then you can't switch them that character because, oh, I know that guy. He was so-and-so. So you get labeled.
Now, is there any experience you had with the Sheik that would surprise people that might only know him as the crazy madman character?
No, not really. I mean, my relationship with him was talking to him briefly in the locker room or when we got paid. He was more preoccupied with running the event and promoting the shows, setting up the other matches. So I didn't have that kind of relationship with him.
At what point in time did you develop the masked superstar character?
Well, that was Guido and I were working as the Mongols for the IWA. And we had gone into, they had made their headquarters in Winston-Salem, which was about 45 miles north of the Charlotte territory headquarters in Charlotte. And as the company was fading out, George Scott had asked us to come in and work for NWA Charlotte, Mid-Atlantic. And Guido was a little anxious to go home. He was wanting to get back home because we were on the road at that time, probably almost a whole year. And of course, he had had his career, and I'm just starting, and we're just starting to make money. And George Scott had approached me because Super Destroyer was in there at the time, Don Jardine. And they were pushing Jardine, and he was the only mask guy that they had. And I guess there was a situation like it always is, Hannibal, it's over money or pay or whatever. So Jardine left, and he didn't have a mask man. So George had approached me about going under a mask. And I said, well, I'm the young guy of the group. If you clear it with Guido, I says, I'd certainly like to do it. I was young, I was green, but I also knew that George being the booker, if he's asking to do it, he's going to push it. And Guido said, yeah, it's no problem. He said, I want to go home anyway. He said, this would be a good chance for you. So the last 4 or 5 weeks that we were working with the Andersons, because we had the IWA Tag Team Champions belt, and of course, Ole and Gene had the NWA belt. So it was belt versus belt. And we were going to eventually lose and drop the belts to them, and Guido was going to leave. So the last 4 weeks, Boris Malenko was going to be my manager, and he and I would go down to Park Center, which was the Monday night event location in Charlotte. And we'd go there every Monday morning, open it up about 9 o'clock, and practice for about 4 or 5 hours till about 1 o'clock. And it wasn't anything new. It was Guido, when I broke in, taught me how to be a babyface, how to be a heel, all the moves. But then when we were working as the Mongols, we were specialists, eyes, ears, nose, and throat. But so it was just a review. So it was like a recap. And I worked against Wahoo McDaniel as Bolo Mongol, hair versus headdress, loser leave town. So that was in Greensboro on a Sunday night. And Monday night, we're in Greenville, South Carolina. And I already had the character made up. My wife's grandmother was a seamstress. She made all my masks, my outfits, my ring jackets. And so I left Greensboro, supposedly leaving town, had purchased another car. I had a green van at the time, and then bought a Ford Galaxy. So I left Greensboro in the Dodge van and drove into Greenville in Ford, and nobody knew. It was years after that.
And you ended up feuding quite extensively with Blackjack Mulligan. What was he like to be in the ring with? And everyone says he was a really tough guy outside the ring. Did you ever see any instances outside the ring where that reputation was put in front of you?
No, not really. I mean, he was a good guy to work with in the ring. All he wanted to do was do the best. He wanted to have a positive match. He worked hard. I worked hard. We had, oh my God, I don't know how many matches together. We had a series of hour Broadways. We had a series of, I think we did 15 hour matches. We did 15 90-minute matches in a cage. We did another 15 no time limit matches. And this was in the summertime in the South, in Charlotte, and we both lost a lot of weight. But he was for the match. He knew I was for the match. Now, we'd get testy once in a while because we're in your wrestling 90 minutes and 60 minutes and this and that. There's some potatoes, but they weren't intentional. And George Scott was a stickler. If you're working heel and babyface, you're not seen together. You don't travel together. You don't. As the Masked Superstar, I was told to stay at a separate hotel, never be around the other guys. The only guy that could travel with me was my manager, Malenko, at the time. And I protected that character because I knew that character was going to make me money. But if I would have got caught in a restaurant or a bar or a hotel, boy, I don't know what would have happened. I'd have probably got canned.
What were some of the other keys to protecting your identity as the Masked Superstar?
Well, I used to wear the mask to and from the car. I used to put the mask on. If I drove into the town, I would always put the mask on 10 or 15 miles out, literally. And then I would put a towel over my head. You know, because you don't, at that time, you don't want, you see somebody driving down the road with a mask. Now, in certain areas, New York, that wouldn't matter. California, that wouldn't matter. But in the South at that time, it did matter. And ironically, there were people, and I'm telling you, I'm not BSing you, there were people that would follow me, especially when I was in Georgia and we'd work in Atlanta or someplace close to Atlanta, and I lived in Atlanta. They would follow you for hours thinking that they'll pull back and they'll try to see who you are. I would purposely drive sometimes an hour out of the way. When I lived 20 minutes or 30 minutes away, I'd go an hour out of the way until they just gave up. But it paid off because part of that character was the mystique of the mask. Who was under that mask? A lot of guys, and you've seen it, they're wrestling. They go out in the ring, they put the mask on, they wrestle, they go back to the dressing room, they shower, and they come out and they got the mask stuck in their back pocket because they want people to know that, oh, that was me earlier. Well, what the hell good's that?
And as far as your matches with Tommy Rich, how did you like working with him, and why do you think he kind of peaked really young and never really came to the same levels that he did when he was in his early 20s?
The matches I had with Tommy were all fantastic, I thought. Tommy had charisma, and like you say, he was young, good-looking guy, should have been in the gym, could have benefited, and I think one of the downfalls was that he didn't put time into the gym. If he would have buffed up a little bit, and you didn't have to look like the Warrior or some muscle-bound guy, but toned up a little bit, I think his charisma and appearance would have lasted a lot longer. He did a down-home country boy, honest interview, sold like hell. People believed that when he was selling, he was hurt, and they also believed that he had the energy and that fire. He was wildfire. I mean, he made a comeback, and it was up to the guy working with him to add to that flame. So, I got nothing but positive memories of working with Tommy. He was like Brad Armstrong, Rick Martel, Tito Santana, Bret Hart. Those guys, I mean, they have it. That's the it factor, and people believed in them.
Did you ever work with Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer?
A couple. I never worked against him. I worked as his partner a few times. Mad Dog was a good amateur. He had some difficult relationships with some of his peers and some of the guys who was working in the territory at that time. But my relationship with him was positive. I know he had some trouble with other guys, yeah.
And Dick Murdoch is another guy that was fairly controversial over the years. How was your experience with him? I know he was a great worker.
Yeah, Dick was my partner a number of times in Japan. Dick always seemed to enjoy wrestling. He liked to clown around a little bit in the ring, but if he wanted to be serious, he didn't look the part, but he was an athlete. He just didn't look the part of that athletic build, but he was a good athlete. He was a good tactician. And the thing that Dick had, he had good psychology. And that's important. You got to know when to do something and why you're doing something. You just don't do it to do it. And unfortunately today, and then in the most recent years, guys just do stuff out of the blue and they don't know why they did it. They saw somebody else do it and it looked cool, but it didn't fit in that particular match. But the thing I remember about Dick, we traveled overseas. We probably were on, I want to say, 10 to 15 tours in Japan, anywhere from 4 weeks to 8 weeks. And every night, Dick thought he was going to outdrink the giant, which you're not going to do. And it was almost to the point it was comical. Andre used to look forward to going out to dinner because he knew he was going to have a contest, and we were both going to drag Murdoch back to the hotel.
And at one point, you tag team with King Kong Bundy to defeat the Road Warriors for the NWA tag team titles. What was it like working the Road Warriors in those early days when they were very known to rough opponents up?
Well, I think that they were hyped up. They wanted to do good. Ole was pushing them. And of course, they had a tremendous career. Both good friends of ours, mine and Barry. They were green. They made some mistakes, but hey, we all do. I mean, when I first started as working as the Mongol, I often say I have to go back and apologize to a lot of people because I probably potatoed the hell out of them, and I didn't mean to. And that's the same situation with anybody that gets in this business. You think you're a lot better than you are until you realize you aren't.
And as far as Ole Anderson, how did you like working for him? There's another guy that he was very successful, but a lot of people don't like him.
Well, I hear that quite often, and Ole is like my relationship with George Scott, the Sheik. Ole never told me anything that he didn't support. He told me what we were going to make or what he thought we were going to make, what we were going to do. Ole liked to, he liked to yell and scream. And I told Bobby Heenan this one time. And Bobby was all upset with, well, he didn't do this, he didn't do that, and I want to do that. I said, Bobby, go talk to him. He might yell at you, but he's not gonna ignore you. And there again, a lot of people say a lot of negative things about Ole, but every time he talked to me and promised me something, it was there. So I can only go on how he treated me. So,
did you ever wrestle Ken Patera?
Oh yeah, we wrestled not singles. We wrestled over the years. I wrestled a number of tag matches, and I think briefly we had a short series with Billy Jack and Ken. Yeah, talk about two strong guys. Holy mackerel! And athletes. Yeah.
Well, Ken Patera, I've done several interviews with, and he's very popular on this channel. I was wondering if you had any stories about him.
No, not really. I mean, there again, when we were working, it was in the Charlotte territory. And if you're a heel, you don't associate with baby faces. And they were baby faces. It just didn't happen.
Similar with Billy Jack Haynes, I guess.
Yeah. He came in as a baby face. I know one thing when we were in New York, Billy Jack, they had convinced Billy Jack to come in, and there he was out in, was it Portland or Washington, wherever he was out there in the Northwest, and they weren't traveling like we were. I mean, you knew how much we were traveling, probably 60 to 70 days straight, flights every day, early flights, the 6 o'clock flight, the 7 o'clock flight, getting off the matches and getting back to the hotel about 1 o'clock, and then starting it over and over again. And I remember the first day Billy was in the TV area and everybody's there, and whoever brought up your agenda, your itinerary, they'd bring you a big stack of maybe 30 tickets and where you're going to be in this and that. And I remember we commented that Billy looked at that and shook his head like, what in the hell have I got myself into?
Yeah, that was a brutal schedule. Now they work 1 day a week and they don't have to travel and they still complain.
Oh yeah, it's completely 360. Yeah.
And they get paid guarantees. They don't even have to draw anymore.
Yeah, amazing. We were a little late, right? Or maybe we were a little too early.
Yeah, I think so. Now, you were one of the first people to slam Andre the Giant. Could you tell us a little bit about working with him? And I know you two were also friends outside of the ring.
Oh yeah, and I didn't know that until a number of years ago. Everybody wants to claim this and that. I was happy to be in the ring with Andre. First time I worked with Andre was in Greenwood, South Carolina. They had just opened this brand new building, and it sold out. And it didn't sell out because of me. I just happened to be the guy working with Andre. It sold out because it was a brand new building. Wrestling was in town. Wrestling was popular, and Andre was there. I just happened to be the lucky guy that's working against him. Well, I go in the ring. Before I go in the ring, the Crockett's, Jimmy Crockett had told me, you got to go at least 10 or 15 minutes. Andre wants to cut the matches short sometimes. George Scott came over and says, I want you to do this, Bill, but go at least 10 or 12, 15 minutes if you can. I said, okay. So I go in the ring, and I'm in the ring waiting, and then I hear this music, and I literally see this giant coming out of the dressing room. Everybody's up to his chest. I'm thinking, what the hell have I gotten myself into? So he comes up to the ring. He steps over the top of the ring, which was his gimmick. And he comes up. So we're starting the match, and I didn't know, but he had already had 3 or 4 bottles of cognac at the time. His gimmick was he had to have 10 or 12 bottles of cognac in the dressing room. And, a bottle of cognac to him, I think I saw something recently, looked like a regular bottle of beer. To us, it's a big container, but to him, it's a couple swigs. So we're working a spot, and he's going to slam me. And he stumbled a little bit, and as he's picking me up, I put my hand on his shoulder, and I pushed myself up. I remember him looking up and says, thank you, boss. And I didn't do it to any other thing to protect him and me. So he slammed me. And from then on, we had a terrific relationship. He was the godfather to my 2 daughters. My wife and him had conversations over the phone when he was in Europe making the movie Princess Bride, because I was in Japan. So he would call her once a week to catch up on things. Tremendous guy. One of my best friends. And I probably was over in Japan with him on 14 or 15 different tours. I was his opponent on some of them, and I was his tag partner on others.
Now, you wrestled earlier in your career for WWE, which a lot of people don't remember. They only remember you as Axe there, but you also wrestled there as the Masked Superstar. Could you tell us about how you had your first run there? I guess Vince McMahon Sr. still would have been bringing you in at that time.
Yeah, we were over in Japan. There again was Andre, and I did it as a favor to Andre. Andre wanted me to come in, and I really didn't want to go in. I was having success in Georgia and Mid-Atlantic, and I didn't care to go in New York. And Andre had asked me a couple times, and then we go to Japan, and we're on I don't know if it was a singles tour or a tag tour. And Senior would come over, and he would make the presentation of the trophy, either to the individual who won the tournament or to the tag team that won the tournament. And he had seen me over there a couple times on the singles tour and the tag team tour. So he had said, I'm interested in bringing you in. And Andre's talked to me a number of times. He said, how would you like to come into New York? I said, well, to be honest, I really wasn't interested. But I didn't want to tell him that. And he said, I got an idea. I want to bring you in as a cowboy. And I said, a cowboy? I said, why did you want to bring me in the first place? He said, well, I've watched your matches and I watch how you carry yourself. I watch how you move. And he says, I've got this idea of bringing you in as a cowboy. I said, Mr. McMahon, I'm not a cowboy. I never was a cowboy. I've ridden a couple horses, but I'd be self-conscious. I would come out of the building thinking there's some cowboys out there and they know that I'm not a cowboy. And I'd be worried about that. I said, I have a mask. I enjoy the mask. It gives me privacy, and I have become the masked superstar. I said, if you want me to come in as a masked man, but they had this silly rule at that time. You could work the whole territory in New York, but you couldn't work in Madison Square Garden with a mask on. You had to cut the face out. So what do I want to go in there for? So I said, if I go into Madison Square Garden and I have a hood on with no face, it's killing me in Japan. I said, thank you, but no thank you. So I ended up going in, but I went in as the masked superstar. And fortunately, they changed the gimmick and they changed the policy that you could wear a mask in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, I heard Mil Mascaras was the first one that they changed it for, wasn't he?
I don't know. It probably was. I mean, it wasn't me because there was other guys in there that,
Yeah.
I think
You
there
would have
was
been
2 or
soon
3.
after.
Huh?
You would have been soon after, though, I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have done it. I just wouldn't have done it because I had a career established in the South and with the magazine stuff. That's going to kill me in Georgia. It's going to kill me in the Atlantic. It's going to kill me if I want to go to Canada. And it's certainly going to kill me in Japan. What am I going to go over there again for?
How did you enjoy working with Mr. Backlund over in New York back when he was champion? You were one of the main challengers for that title.
I get along well with Bob. I see him periodically in some of the signings, and we were talking about him, and I'll tell you what, Bob was, and I'm sure he still is. He was one of the strongest guys I've ever gotten in a ring with. I've seen him lift guys up with one arm, 300-pounders. So he was just put in a tough situation that the fans at that particular time, they were split. Some fans liked him, some didn't like him. And his interview was different, but his performance in the ring was excellent. I always thought that Bob made his biggest gains when he turned heel. If he'd have turned heel years ago, oh my God, who would have known what would happen?
Did you have much contact with superstar Billy Graham?
No. It's funny because when I started that first Monday that I started as the superstar, it was superstar on the booking sheet, and most of the guys thought it was Billy coming in, but it wasn't.
Now, you also wrestled Hulk Hogan as the masked superstar.
Right.
What was that like to be in the ring with him in those days?
Well, that carried over to New York, but it actually started when we were in Japan because he was coming back and forth on tours that I was on. So we had wrestled as partners and we had wrestled as opponents a number of times. I always got along good with Hogan. There again, he was green at that time. I was more experienced than he was, but he was always willing to learn. He would listen. He wanted to learn the trade, and he became the franchise. So what can you say? He changed the business.
You also worked with Jimmy Snuka. He has a reputation for being a bit of a crazy man outside the ring, but obviously he was over. Many people would argue at one point in time, apparently Rocky Johnson, for instance, told me he believed at one point Snuka could have actually been more over than Hogan, but he had too many personal demons.
I agree. I agree. But Jimmy, I mean, I always had a good relationship with Jimmy. There again, we didn't associate because most of the time we were in different towns. Every time I was around Jimmy, I had positive relationships with him. He did have some demons, as we know, But yeah, he was popular. He was. I think at one time, Rocky was probably right. Uh, he was the franchise at that time.
There's a fan that wanted to know, how did the catering at WWE change over the years? I'm going to guess for McMahon Sr., there probably wasn't any. And maybe as Junior took over and you had those long TV taping days, it got better, but I'll let you answer the question.
I don't remember working for Senior where they had catering, to be honest with you. They may have. But the TVs at that time weren't as long as they were when later on when Junior took over. But the meals were good. I mean, they had anything that you wanted. They had chicken and steak and vegetables and potatoes and a number of different vegetables and sodas and electrolyte drinks and things like that. Uh, that was a big part of the day because you're there from 9 o'clock, and if you're on the late TV, you might be in there till midnight. So you're doing 3 hours of shows per night, but a lot of the fans don't realize you start doing your promos at 9. So you're doing promos from 9 till about 5, and you have your lunch, and then you're starting back in the matches. And they serve the catering all day.
Do you have any Captain Lou Albano stories?
No, I don't. I wasn't around Lou that much. I mean, you'd seen he was in the territory at the time, but there again, he wasn't our manager, and we didn't have much contact with him other than, hey, how you doing? What's up? Hello, goodbye.
When you were Super Machine, they brought you back in with that gimmick. What was your? I know you were teaming with Andre, so you're probably happy about that. But did you have any hesitations of coming in as Super Machine rather than the Masked Superstar for that run?
Well, with the Super Machine gimmick started, we were going there again. Andre and I were in Japan together, and we were going to be on the tag team tournament as partners. Before we got there, they had a tag team called the Machines, and they had jumped to Bubba. The manager stayed, but the team left. So Inoki called us to the office and made the suggestion that, hey, we got the manager, and what we want to do is we want to have the Giant Machine and the Super Machine. Everybody knows who you are. They know you're a superstar. They, of course, know it's Andre. It was supposed to be a four-week deal. And Andre had mentioned it when he called back to the office, and they sent Gene Okerlund over, and he did a series of interviews with us, promos, and then they decided to bring it over to New York. There again, it was only supposed to be a short-lived gimmick because Andre was going to do the Princess Bride. But in the meantime, it started catching on. It wasn't going to be forever, but they had the Junkyard Machine, they had the Hogan Machine, they had the Animal Machine. It was fun. So they brought in when Andre left to make the movie Princess Bride, they had to replace one of the original machines. They brought in the big machine, which was Blackjack Mulligan. So there again, I went in. I had no intentions going back into New York, but I went in as a favor and friendship to Andre.
I see. Now you feuded with King Kong Bundy and Big John Studd there. There was the rumor, well, not just a rumor, a lot of people have said it, that Andre would often bully Big John Studd, and John was supposedly a little bit afraid of him. As Andre's partner, did you ever get any insight into that?
I witnessed it. And it wasn't bullying. Andre was the giant. And John was my partner, superstar number 2 in Mid-Atlantic. And John was my friend too. Andre used to, if you remember, and the fans may remember, when Stud would come in, he would step over the top rope just like Andre. And John would comment all the time that he was the new giant. And I remember Andre asked me a couple times in the dressing room, please don't do that. That's my gimmick. And John continued to do it. And Andre got pissed off. And what you don't want to do is piss off a giant. And I was in, I think it was Des Moines, Iowa. We had a tag match. And Andre, once again, I remember him sitting there. Please don't step over the top rope. Well, we go in the ring, and he sees John stepping over the top rope. Andre beat the living shit out of John. And that's the last time I saw John in the ring.
There's a fan on here that wants to know why your Demolition walkout gear had fewer spikes on it than Smash's. He always wondered why that was. Maybe you know, maybe you don't.
The jackets or the
jackets, I guess, that you walked out with.
I don't recall. I never counted them. We didn't make them. They were made for us. So.
What were those sparkles that you guys had on you? I always thought that was really cool.
Well, that was oh my goodness. It was sparkles that you put in your hair and stuff. But that got to be tedious after a while because you couldn't get rid of them. You'd shower, you'd rub down, you'd shower, and you got sparkles all over you. So we gave that up after a while.
Did the what's his name? The Moondog Rex, when he was removed from the original Demolition, was there any heat there between him and you, or him and Smash?
No, we were talking about that earlier too on the in the evening. The Moondogs were the champions for the company there, I think, for multiple years. So everybody knew what they looked like. And the character Demolition was going to work. I had been in there as a superstar, so they had no reference point. They didn't know what I looked like without the mask. But they certainly knew as soon as Moondog came who he was, Randy. So they start saying Moondog, Moondog, Moondog the first night. And I forget what the first night was, Hershey or Meadowlands, but either or. We did two opening debuts. Both nights, they didn't know who I was. But both nights, they were yelling Moondog, Moondog. So after the second night, I told Randy, I said, this gimmick is going to work, but it's not going to work because they recognize you. And I went back, and I remember telling Vince, I said, the character is going to work, but unfortunately, it's not going to work because they know Randy. I'll volunteer. I'll go back to Japan because I was, I knew I could get on the phone calling, he can go to Japan. He said, no. He says, I think the character is going to work. And he said, Randy, we'll give you another gimmick. And I think they put him under a mask where they covered his face. He was one of the shadows, yeah. And he graciously stepped aside. He could, he was part of the instrumental in developing it. So I felt bad that he was going to lose it, but I knew it was going to work. And he said, no. He said, I understand what you're saying. And he said, I hear him, and that's not going to work. So he stepped aside, and that's how we brought in Bear. The office had suggested 3 or 4 other guys that were in the territory at the same time to do the Smash. And I said, it's going to have the same thing. They know Randy. They're going to know these guys. It's not going to work. So if you want to put it on 2 other guys, that's fine. I'll go back and put the mask on and go to Japan, go to Georgia. So that's how that developed.
Do you recall who some of those other potential Smashes?
Yeah, but I can't mention them because they don't know. And I wouldn't do that to them. But they were well-known guys. But there again, and you know yourself, and we talked about it earlier, how many times have they rehashed a guy and take him off TV for a little bit, and they bring him back in, and he's this new guy. And then they take him off TV, and they bring him back a third time, and he's this new guy. The hell, the fans know he's not the new guy. He's the guy that they had 2 shows before or 2 years ago. It's got to be different people.
Now, it was interesting. I only recently rewatched No Holds Barred and realized that it was you wrestling Hulk Hogan in the opening scene there. Were you at all concerned about doing that without the makeup, that people would know it was you? It's amazing that it didn't look like you somehow.
Yeah, you didn't know. I'll tell you a funny true story. No, Barry was supposed to do it first, and I was happy because that meant they flew out one day early. They did the taping the second day and flew back the third day. That meant I was going to have 3 days off. I was happy. Well, a couple weeks later, Hogan comes to me because we had already had a series of matches in Japan, in the United States, and he just felt more comfortable with me working with him. And I said, if you clear it with Barry, it's fine. I'll do it. Now, Barry's happy because he's got 1, 2, 3 days off. So we go out, we do the deal, and my parents know that the movie's coming out. When the movie came out, they went to the theater. They live in a small town south of Pittsburgh. They watched the movie, and they went through the whole movie. And I remember my mother telling me, she looked at my dad, she says, they must have taken Bill out of the movie. He wasn't in there. I didn't see him. My dad says, I didn't see him either. So the credits are running, and now they see Jake Bullet, Bill Eadie. So it's a small town, so they stayed in the theater and watched the second time. And then they make the announcement, Jake Bullet. Then they're looking at me and they said, it took us 2 times to see you.
Yeah, it's so weird because when you know it's you, it's obvious, but somehow if you're not expecting it, it doesn't compute.
Right.
How was the pay for that compared to your normal wrestling pay?
It was about the same. It was, the nice thing was that we took it in one take. A lot of people don't realize that. They had the building scheduled from 9 a.m. until 9 p.m. They were going to do this and this and this and this. So we flew out. Hogan met me in the airport at Atlanta, and we're flying out and we're discussing the match, what we're going to do. This is what he wants to do. This is what we do, blah, 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 blah. So we landed in I think it was Topeka, went to the gym, worked out, got up the next morning. They did all that makeup and all that stuff. And they said, okay, we're going to do our first take. And they had planned to do this all day. So we did the match, one take. And like their jaws dropped. Well, that was perfect. And then one guy said, well, what do we do now? And Hogan says, we're done. So we had to do a couple still photos, position, holding, and this and that, and things like that. But they wanted us to have that match 4 or 5 times. We didn't need it 4 or 5 times. They took a couple sections out of it because it was like a 12 or 15-minute match that we had. And I think in the movie it was like less than 2, right? So then we're gone. Then we get back on the Hogan had to stay, but I was gone. I was out of there and home the next day.
Were they at all afraid about kayfabing the live crowd there? Because wrestling was still secret. Yeah.
I don't think they may have been, but what are you shooting a movie for, right?
Right. Because they would have known.
And I think the people probably was says, oh, this is just a movie. This is not wrestling. In the wrestling, it's different. It's more real. This is a movie, so they have to stop and this and that.
A lot of fans wanted me to ask you about the time where you and Smash were number one and number two in the Royal Rumble. How did they approach you with that? And were
We
you
just
for or
we
against?
actually drew numbers. We drew numbers, and it just happened that way. And we were talking about that earlier. I still feel those punches that he gave me, and he says he still feels the punches I gave him, and it was just natural. What were you going to do? Stand out there and stare at each other for a minute or two? I don't remember what the time frame was, but I think it was at least a minute or 2 minutes, and then the next guy came out. To be honest with you, that's probably the first time that both of us were happy to see Andre come to the ring.
I see. What's your theory on enhancement matches? Because I noticed you guys were pretty rough in there. Do you find it just that you shouldn't give them much and just kind of really display yourself when you get a match like that, like you guys had so often in those days?
Well, that's where you make your money. The guys that are you're wrestling in the TV matches, we didn't get paid for that. That's their chance to shine, and that's their chance to make money. But we have to look good. We have to sell our product. Our product is us. Now, it's funny that you say we look pretty rough. We made it look real, but guys would say, we never felt that. Golly days, looked like you killed us. We watched that match, looked like you took our head off, and we really didn't. Now, some of the guys are really taking somebody's head off. That's the difference between being able to work and wrestling. Being able to work is wrestling and not hurting people and making it look like you're killing them.
How did you get along with the Ultimate Warrior behind the scenes?
I knew Jim when he first started. He was in Atlanta. He was going through chiropractic school there. And we ran into him in the gym periodically. He was starting to get into wrestling. And I think he and Sting went to Mid-South for Watts. He was a different guy when I saw him later. And I won't speak ill of the dead, but he wasn't the same guy. I don't think he liked wrestling. He knew he was making good money at it. I don't think he respected it. But I never had any harsh words with him. I never had any disagreements with him. But I used to observe sometimes we would do signings and appearances, and he wanted to isolate himself. He didn't want to be around the rest of us like we had some kind of disease. So that's my only qualms with him.
How was he in the ring? Because I know you also had some matches against him.
There again, it was tough. It's like pulling teeth. He had 3 moves: run to the ring, shake the ropes, clothesline. I don't think he was interested in learning. I don't think he thought he had to learn anything. Hogan would learn. Hogan improved drastically from when I first saw Hogan in the Georgia territory when he was in there as Terry Boulder to when he became Hulk Hogan. And it's not like I'm bashing Jim. If Jim was sitting here right now, I'd tell him the same thing. We had horrible matches with him. And he wasn't interested in having a good match. He was interested in Ultimate Warrior.
What was Randy Savage like with you behind the scenes?
Randy was kind of private. It wasn't only us. He didn't associate with many people. He was cordial when we would see him in the planes and the airports and stuff like that. But as far as the locker room, he and Liz had a separate dressing area. Hogan had his own dressing area. A lot of guys did at that time. I think Randy really cared about the business. I think he put a lot of effort into it. He certainly worked out and looked the part. He was intense. Much different than the Warrior. I think Randy, he was brought up in the business. Him and his brother, and his father, of course, was a good professional wrestler. So it was, I think he cared and protected it. Yeah.
Is it true that you were involved with promoting some events in Northern Ontario at one point in the 90s?
Yeah. Yeah. It was through oh my goodness, some kind of charitable group that approached a friend of mine. I think we did 2 shows, and I don't remember the charity. It was for, God, as I get older, I can't remember a lot of things anymore. But yeah, we did. Jake was on the show. Boy, my God, I remember going up there and it was a big snowstorm. I think we did 2 shows and then flew home. I think it was for a children's group or something.
Okay. Yeah, because I always found that interesting. Demolition Axe. I think it was maybe in Hearst or Timmins, Ontario. And I was just thinking, how in the hell is Bill Eadie promoting a show in one of these towns? Because the connection, I just couldn't understand it.
Well, it wasn't through me. It was a friend of mine that was, it wasn't Richard Charlot, but it was somebody in that area that I had come across through my years of wrestling that asked me to draw up some contracts and bring up some talent. And they had some local talent. And yeah, it was fun. It was long distance promoting, so you know how that is.
Yeah, I avoid that because you can't trust people. Just to wind it down here, do you have any stories about Haku? He's a very popular guy on this channel.
Oh, Haku is a good friend of mine. I mean, you talk about a consummate professional and a good family man, good athlete, and a tough guy. Everything that I would say about Haku would be positive. I see him. We didn't get a chance to see him at all last year, but we like to bump into those guys at the signings and things like that once or twice a year, and I always look forward to it. I think the last time we were together was a signing in Atlantic City, and he had his 2 boys with him. And I guess they're very popular in Japan, so kudos to him on that.
Any thoughts on Roddy Piper, who we unfortunately lost a while ago?
Piper was a character. Piper was a good friend. I met Piper during his early years. He was in Japan, and he was over there as the masked Canadian. And he was a character then. And throughout his whole career, did nothing but good for this business. That was a shock. Yeah, we were talking earlier this evening, and you know, Hacksaw Reed and Joe and Nikolai Volkov and so many guys have passed. It's just, you think back of all the relationships and all the times and hours you spent with these guys and drinks and meals you've had with them. You just miss them.
You took the NWA Southern title from.
You know who I don't miss, Animal? You know who I don't miss?
Where's your man bun?
I don't miss you. Okay, it's tied up, which is what I'm gonna do to you. I'm gonna hook you and stretch you if I ever get to Canada, wherever you are now. Okay. Once again, you're a user.
I'm not in Canada.
Well, we're gonna go out. We're gonna go out to Arizona then. We're gonna go to Arizona, then we're gonna get to Canada. You're gonna be hooked. You're gonna start calling me Thez Jr. if you're not careful. Okay, let me tell you, you're wasting too much of my client Bill's time right now. Once again, you've mistaken my kindness for weakness. And if you dare do that again, let me tell you, my kindness, exactly. If you do that again, I'm going to get my good friend, the Blood Hunter, and we're going to come after you. Okay, let me tell you, we're going to come after you. Good night.